and welcome to today's video. Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to talk about the newest, the latest, the hottest new drops from e.l.f. Cosmetics. They've come out with several new products. I've got my hands on quite a few of them. Some of them have been out for, just a few days. Some are just like brand new releases, kind of out of nowhere. We'll talk about it. I cannot wait to dive on in, so let's go ahead and get started. Out of nowhere, e.l.f. dropped a new foundation. This is the Soft Glam Satin Foundation. Comes in 36 shades and it's available for $8 on the e.l.f. website and eventually in local retailers that carry e.l.f. products. And I cannot wait to dive in. I purchased 2 shades because I couldn't decide which shade was going to match. They did have some photos when this first launched, like the day it became available. I ordered it. By now, at this point, they probably do have some swatches on their Instagram page, which is what I would recommend you check out and see if they have that available for better matching. So the 2 shades that I picked up is 15 Warm and 21 Light Neutral. I couldn't decide. I have always kind of matched myself incorrectly with e.l.f. products just because it's been hard to tell with photos and descriptions of the products and the shade ranges and the undertones. I do like how on their website they do break it down by category, so the fair shades in the cool, neutral, and warm. Same thing with light, cool, neutral, warm, and medium shades and so on and so forth. They do break it down by undertones, so I do think that that makes it a little bit more helpful. But because I couldn't decide, I picked up 2 shades, so we're going to see which one matches me better. I think the 15 Warm, just looking at it and the packaging, it looks like it's going to be a little bit more yellow and probably a lot more doable for a match versus this one. This one is 21 Light Neutral, and it does seem a little bit darker. And if you look at the 2 together, the difference in the warm and the neutral. And I don't know if you can tell on camera, but in person, the neutral does look a little bit more kind of slightly cool tone next to this one. So we'll have to just see, because sometimes what you see on the outside of the packaging is clear. It may not be the exact same representation as what it looks like applied. And then once it sets, does it oxidize? So we're going to find that out today. I think I'm going to swatch the 15 Warm first and see what this looks like. And if this is too light, then I can always add this 21 Light Neutral into it, so it kind of balances things out and works out. Now for primers, the choice is yours. e.l.f. does have a lot to choose from. They have several and I own them all. They have the putty primers, the liquid putty, the power grip that has that kind of green jelly look to it, the power grip with the niacinamide, which I do really like, and then of course an old favorite that was brought back recently, the Jelly Pop Dew Primer that smells like watermelon. Has a little bit of a sticky, kind of tacky feel, but not as tacky as the original Power Grip. But I'm going to go in with this because I love this and I have enjoyed having this back in my collection. Okay, so this is all nicely blended evenly across the entire face. I'm going to do 2 different methods of application as far as the sponge versus the brush, and we'll kind of see which one works best with this foundation. But this does have a bit of a kind of sticky feel, so I feel like the foundation is going to stick to this beautifully. So let's go ahead and swatch these out. So here on my palette, I have the 2 shades swatched for you. The 15 Warm is on the top, and the bottom is the 21 Light Neutral. The formula is a little bit on the thicker side. As you can see, there's not a rapid drip down. So here's a swatch of the 15 Warm, and I just kind of dabbed it on with my damp sponge. So you can see that's quite yellow. And then here is a swatch of the 21 Light Neutral. I'm just going to mix the 2 together because I think the 15 Warm is going to be a little light. So this is half with just the damp sponge, and the 2 shades together, I feel like I need to kind of scale back on the 21 Light Neutral. But I do think that it blended in really nicely. It looks really smooth on the skin, and I would say it does kind of lean satiny. I would say just slightly more dewy, but not by much. It's not an overly dewy or radiant foundation as of right now. We'll see how this sort of plays out through the rest of the day. But I do like so far how it looks with the sponge. So on this side, I'm going to use a brush. And I'm using the e.l.f. Duo Complexion brush. I ordered another one because my first one is in my travel makeup bag that just stays in there just for travel, vacation, weekend trips. I needed to have another one because this is actually a very good brush. And it's applying nicely with the brush as well so far. And I did the same mixture of the two shades on this side so it's not as wild throughout the day. And I'm doing kind of like a stippling motion, blending this in. I don't want to swipe too much just in case you can see some visible lines and streaks from the brush. All right, so here is the side with the e.l.f. Complexion Duo brush. And I do think that I kind of prefer the side with the sponge. For some reason, that looks to be a little bit more even. I don't know, you tell me. This is the sponge side, and this is the brush side. Overall, I do think that this foundation blended in nicely. Going forward, I think I'm going to use this over a pore filling primer, either the putty primer from e.l.f. or something that's pore filling from another brand, because I do feel like I can see how it just kind of is, I hate to say accentuating my pores, but I didn't do any pore filling or pore diffusing primers. You can see a little bit more texture on this side, a lot more imperfections, my scarring. I have some sunspots that are starting to come to the surface of the skin, so you can see a little bit of freckles here. And I just feel like the sponge, I don't know, I feel like it gave me more coverage, and I still prefer that. What do you think? So the sponge versus the brush. I think I'm going to add a little bit more to see how well it builds on this side with the sponge to see if I can make this a little bit better for me personally. It's not terrible by any means, but I do prefer the sponge method, so I'm going to add a little bit more, just a teeny bit more, because I don't feel like I need coverage. This did cover really well, and I feel like the sponge just instantly made that area where I have more imperfections and more textured a little bit more blurred, despite not having any sort of pore filling or smoothing primer underneath. So I think this is better suited with a sponge. And I'm going to take some down my neck as well because it is a little darker than the rest of my body. I'm going to do my concealer and setting powder off camera. I'm also going to do most of my brows off camera as well. But before that, I wanted to show you their new brow laminating gel that they recently launched sometime within the last week, couple days to a week. This out of nowhere, again, another drop, just like the Soft Glam Foundation. I don't do a whole lot of brow lamination, so I thought I'd give this a try. So when you pull this out, you may have noticed that there is a big goop on the very end of the spoolie. So you just kind of have to wipe that off so that you don't put any excess. And we're gonna see how this works throughout the brows. I already have my brows combed and kind of groomed in place. I just need to add a little bit of this and then use a brow pen and see how that looks and works out for me. And of course, they provided you a comb and like a little brush so you can kind of comb through and lift up your brow hairs. You can comb them up. And I would say you would probably want to do this fairly quick because I feel like this is going to set down. And once that happens, you may not be able to move the brows too much at that point. So I think it's one that you would want to do one brow at a time, apply the product, comb it through, get your brows where you want them, and then leave them alone. So that was pretty easy, I would say. And I do feel like the brows are kind of like shellacked and like glued down to my actual skin. And it's making them look just a little bit patchy and a little bit more sparse than they already are. But I'm going to fill in with a brow pen and see how that works out. And then I will let you know my thoughts on this. So I'm using my Maybelline Build-A-Brow pen, which I absolutely love, to fill in some little sparse areas and kind of make my brows look a little bit more full. And it's going on very easily right over that lamination gel, which is a good thing. And I do feel like my brows are going to be in place all day long, which again, another good thing. e.l.f. has concealers as well, the camo concealers, and both the original and the hydrating. I personally am not the biggest fan of the hydrating version, so I didn't use that. I did use a concealer that I enjoy and love from the drugstore. It's the NYX Can't Stop Won't Stop. I mixed two shades. I will list and link both of them down below. I wanted to pair products with this foundation that I have already used before and products that I can count on actually working and not interfering with the wear and the results at the end of the day with this foundation. So that's why I went with the Can't Stop Won't Stop from NYX. Then I did set my under eye with the Maybelline Loose Fit Me powder with a powder puff. I did not do any baking. I do think that I want to set this foundation just because it leaves a bit of a slightly dewy finish on the skin, as I mentioned earlier, and I personally prefer a much more matte leaning finish. And I'm just going to pat this translucent powder right over my forehead and focusing a lot of the powder, or most of the powder, onto the nose, between the brow, the forehead, and the chin, the main T-zone area that I do get oily throughout the day. I don't get super oily, but I do want to set this a little bit. And I'm using the NYX HD finishing powder. It's a pressed, it basically looks white, but it's not. It's a pressed loose powder, and I got this little mini from Ulta's website. And I'm using a ColourPop F29 brush just to push this into the skin very minimally, and I chose a translucent powder so that I don't have any sort of tint from a face powder or setting powder interfering with, again, the results of this foundation and the color. I want to see if this is going to oxidize as the day goes on. Bronzer and blush is done. Moving on to the next new release from e.l.f. They came out with a new eyeshadow primer. This is the It Down Eyeshadow Primer, and they did have a primer previously in a more kind of champagne, kind of peachy looking tube that used to be around $2. I don't know what the cost of that is now, if they still sell it. But that never really worked out for me personally with preventing creasing. I do have oily lids, so I have high hopes of this working. I hope that this prevents creasing and keeps my eyeshadow nice and intense as I apply it. And we are going to test this out to see if it actually does prevent creasing and if it's an improvement from their previous eyeshadow primer. I'm going to use a brush to pat this in as I normally do with my primers. I like to blend them either with my finger or a brush, and I'm going to do the same thing with this one. It applied beautifully with this brush, and the actual primer itself is clear. There's no color once it's applied. It looks like it has a bit of a nudish tint to it when you first pull the product out of the tube, but once you blend it in, it looks clear. I'm also going to take a little bit of translucent powder over the primer to set that and kind of remove that bit of a tacky feel from freshly applied primer. I do think that this helps me with blending, because sometimes when you put a primer on and then you go straight in with your color, whether it's on the lid or the crease, it can be difficult to blend sometimes. Depending on the formula of the primer, the formula of the eyeshadow also comes into play. But generally speaking, I like doing this with pretty much any primer that I use, whether it's drugstore or high-end, and the end result with my blending is a lot better. What better way to test out e.l.f.'s Lock It Down Primer than using one of their own eyeshadow formulas? I have one of the bite-sized little quads in the Pumpkin Pie. I'm going to do a pretty simple look today. I'm going to start with this shade right here, which is a bit more of a smoky, kind of bronzy shade. This one is a little bit more of a coppery, kind of orangey undertone. And I'm going to pat and press this from inner corner to outer corner right over their primer. That went on beautifully, and look at the pigment of these eyeshadows. They're so inexpensive and they are absolutely incredible for just a couple bucks. With a big fluffy crease brush, I'm just going to blend and soften that line and the edge of that eyeshadow. With the same crease brush that I use for blending, I'm going to take a little bit of this shade here, which is a very warm brown shade. I'm going to use a tiny bit of that to add just a little bit of shadowing to my crease, but I'm not taking a lot of this because I want to do a very simple look, but I also want to blend something into the crease to see how it blends over that primer. And I don't see any skipping, any drag, any sort of patchiness. That blended out really nicely over the primer. And I just love this color. It's so pretty, kind of bronzy and just kind of summery. And that's kind of the vibe that I've been going for lately. I also took those same two shades and ran that on the lower lashes. I did that off camera. All I need to do now is do some eyeliner and mascara, and then I will show you the completed eye look. Liner and lashes are done. Moving on to the lip combo for today. e.l.f. has a new plumping gloss. They did have some plumping lip glosses in their line previously, which I had never tried, but I think they've added some new shades and they've also repackaged the formula, and now it has a different look to it. I picked up one shade in the Sweet Talker. This actually looks stunning. If you could see this in person, this is so beautiful. It's the perfect everyday pinky shade with the most beautiful glow and shimmer in this gloss. It's not glittery, but I think that shimmer is going to add a bit of a kind of glossy look to the lips. It's going to make the lips look fuller, juicier, more hydrated and plump. All good things, right? So I want to start off with a lip liner. I do really enjoy e.l.f.'s lip liners. They have these newer ones. The Cream Glides, these are $2 and they're absolutely mind-blowing how good they are. Okay, so I started off with one shade. This is the Pinky Swear, and then I went back and I picked up 2 more shades. Now, I don't know if this is going to sting or burn, so I'm kind of scared. I'm going to take one for the team because I don't like plumpers that burn, that sting, that make me want to immediately go and wash this off my mouth. Like, I like a cooling sensation, a minty kind of feel. I'm okay with that. But anything further, I don't know if I'm going to like it. So high hopes for this. Hopefully it doesn't burn. But let's start with the lip liner first. Look at how stunning that color is. I absolutely adore this shade. You need this. So as with most glosses, they come with a doe foot applicator. This one seems rather large, so I feel like what came off when I first pulled this out is going to be sufficient to cover my top lip and my bottom lip. I do smell a very subtle kind of sweet mint. You know what I just immediately thought of? It's the Orbit Sweet Mint Gum. That's exactly what this smells like, or very, very similar. Here we go. Oh, that shade is so pretty. Yes. Look at that shade. Yes, yes, yes. I love this color. This is so me, and I'm so glad that I picked this shade up. I love it. It feels a little bit thicker. Very cushiony, very hydrating, kind of buttery feeling on the lips. So I do like the way this feels. And oh, wait a minute. I'm feeling something. Okay. It's like a very subtle kind of cooling sensation. We'll let this hang out and see. But I'm feeling it mostly around the edge of my upper lip. Not so much anything on my bottom lip. It just feels normal right now. Okay. So far it's doable. It's not like super intense. It just feels a little cool, a little minty. Okay, now I feel it a little bit on my tongue. No, I don't like that on my tongue. I feel like it's doable. It's not painful by any means. So the last thing that I want to do is add a little bit of glow to the high points of my cheek, and I want to use their new glow stick. I did a video on their new Jelly Pop Volt collection. If you haven't seen that video, I will link it for you in the card section so you can check this out. I swatched this, the actual lip oil that is a new one. It's stunning, guys. Like, this is beautiful. And the Jelly Pop, it came with like a little makeup bag. We talked all about it in a separate video, so I will link it for you. But I want to see how this is going to go on over the foundation. And I'm going to tap that in with a ColourPop brush. This is an F32. So this is blending in really beautifully right over the foundation, over the powder, over my blush, bronzer, no issues. But there is a little bit of makeup on the actual stick itself, which I think is to be expected when you take a stick product and swipe it across makeup already applied on the face. It's going to lift a little bit, and this has a little bit more of an emollient kind of feel. I'm going to take a little bit of that down the nose as well with what's left on my brush. Because this is a bit more of a creamier, kind of balmy formula, I don't want to use too much in the areas that I typically produce oil. So the nose, I kind of tread softly with this highlighter. Do a little bit on the temples, just a pinch. And this is such a beautiful shade. I think I already said that. I just love this color and how easily this sort of melts into the skin. So I think going forward, I do think that this is going to be applied with a damp sponge. I think that's how I like the way it looks. It does look a little bit heavy and kind of dry right in this area here where I applied it with a brush. So I do think that the claims of this being more satin with a hydrating base is actually true. There is a little bit of a dewiness, which you can probably see a little bit with all the rest of the products applied, but definitely visible when I first applied it at the beginning of the video. I do think that it is pretty accurate. It is a satin, kind of leaning with a more hydrated feel. It blended in really nicely. For me personally though, I think I will continue to use a damp sponge going forward, and I think I will tend to set this with either a loose powder or a pressed powder, just because I need to take down a little bit of that dewiness. Again, that goes back to my personal preference, but I do think it's a really pretty finish and it looks really nice on the skin. The eyeshadow went on very easily over the primer. Now the question is it going to crease? So stay tuned. The jury's still out on that. And the lip plumper actually just still continues to feel kind of minty and cooling. So yay, I love that. I'm glad that it's not painful and it's not irritating my lips. So I like it. What do you think? So this is what it looks like. I am filming on my iPhone, so I do apologize if it's a little shaky, the camera, but this is what it looks like. And the high points of the cheek is the highlighter, but the nose, you can see how much oil I'm producing on the nose. Here, if I angle my face, do you see that? My chin, that is the zone of oil production for me. And then usually the parameters is kind of dry. And this does have a little bit of a dewiness around that area. Not too bad, not as bad as it looks in the center portions of my face. So honestly, I think I would need to use this foundation with a pore diffusing primer or mattifying primer on underneath, using the sponge as I did in the demo because that's what I prefer as far as the way it looks initially. Set it with some powder and then hit it with some setting spray and hope for the best, because I just feel like without those types of products, especially like a mattifying primer and a spray, this is going to be my result. So I do think it benefits from additional helping products. So I'm not too thrilled with it. And honestly, I haven't ever really been on board with e.l.f. foundations. I have never truly loved their foundations or their concealers. I don't think, for me personally, that's their strongest type of products. So anyways, that's my end result after wearing it for 10.5 hours. So this is the eyeshadow look after wearing it for 10.5 hours. You can probably see I do have some creasing here, and I did have a little bit of fading with the eyeshadow, so it's not as bold and intense as it was earlier today. And I do think that the primer doesn't really prevent creasing as much as I had hoped, which is a bummer because I had high hopes for this. It's here and right in through here. So I probably would try it again, maybe using less and still setting it with more powder. You know, not too thrilled with the primer either. So that kind of sucks because the price points are pretty good and overall, you know, they're an affordable brand, but I don't know, I feel like I'm getting the same result with their original primer that they had years ago that was like $2 that did absolutely nothing. I would say this is a little bit better than that, but anyways, here's the update of the eyeshadow. And that's it, my friends. I hope that this was helpful. I hope that this was fun to see their newest products sort of featured in a video. I am going to be doing a one brand for e.l.f., so stay tuned for that. If you are interested in that, let me know in the comments so I can move that up on my to-do list and get that done for you. Everything is going to be listed and linked for you down below in case you want to shop anything that I featured in today's video. I appreciate you so much for being here, for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so we can do this again sometime. And you can also be friends with me on Instagram. My username pops up here on the screen. I hope to see you there. Take care, you guys, and we'll talk very soon. Bye-bye.